You say someone's name 100 times a day. You don't even notice it anymore. It's the first real word most people ever learn to spell. But for most of human history, saying someone's name out loud could get you into serious trouble. That's not a metaphor. That's anthropology. Think about your own name for a second. It's on your documents. It's in your contacts list. It's the thing strangers ask for within the first 10 seconds of meeting you. Your name feels like the most basic, obvious piece of who you are. So basic that you assume every human who ever lived must have had one too. But the deeper anthropologists dig into early human societies, the stranger that assumption starts to look. Here's the reframe. Names, as you use them, are not ancient. Naming systems are ancient. But the personal name, the single word that belongs only to you and gets spoken freely in front of anyone, is a much newer invention than you'd think. For tens of thousands of years, humans identified each other through something completely different. Start with the obvious question. How do you talk about someone if you don't say their name? The answer is kinship. Early human groups were small, tightly bonded, and built entirely around family roles. You weren't Marcus or Elena. You were someone's daughter, someone's second son, someone's mother's brother. The anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss spent decades studying these systems and found something remarkable. In many small-scale societies, kinship terms didn't just describe relationships. They replaced personal names almost entirely in everyday speech. Calling your uncle uncle wasn't a nickname. It was often the only word you were allowed to use. And these weren't loose, casual categories either. Levi-Strauss described entire classificatory kinship systems, where a single term could apply to dozens of people at once. Every man of your father's generation on one side of the family might be called by the same word your own father was called. Every woman of your mother's generation might share a single term too. From the inside, this wasn't confusing at all. It was precise. It told you instantly how to behave around a person, what you owed them, what you could ask of them, who you were and were not permitted to marry. A personal name would have told you none of that. A kinship term told you everything you actually needed to know. Picture trying to survive in that world with only a first name the way you use one now. Someone says Tomas and you have no idea if he outranks you, if he's obligated to share meat with you after a hunt, if approaching his sister is forbidden or expected. The kinship term did the job your name can't. Came preloaded with rules. Why would a whole society build language this way? Because in a group of 30 or 40 people, everyone already knows exactly who everyone else is. A name that only points to one unique individual is almost redundant. What matters more is the relationship. Are you older or younger than me? Are you allowed to marry my sister? Do I owe you food after a hunt? Kinship terms answered all of that in a single word. Personal name answered none of it. But it goes further than convenience. In many cultures, names weren't just labels. They were considered dangerous. The Yanomami people of the Amazon, studied extensively by the anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon, treat personal names as something close to sacred property. Saying an adult's real name out loud, especially in front of them, is considered deeply disrespectful. Instead, people are addressed through their relationship to others. So-and-so's father. So-and-so's wife. The name itself is almost never spoken casually. And when someone dies, their name becomes even more forbidden. It can be considered dangerous, even offensive, to say a dead person's name aloud, because doing so is thought to disturb them or summon grief that hasn't been allowed to settle. Does that sound extreme? Shouldn't, not really. You already do a version of this. Think about how careful people get around the name of someone who just died. You lower your voice. You choose different words. We lost him instead of using his name directly. That instinct didn't come from nowhere. This pattern of avoiding names shows up again and again across unrelated cultures, which is exactly what makes anthropologists take it seriously. It isn't one isolated superstition. It's a structure, and structures that repeat across isolated societies, separated by oceans and thousands of years, usually point to something deep in how the human mind processes identity and danger. Consider what a name taboo actually does for a group. If speaking a dead person's name is forbidden, grief has to be handled differently. You can't dwell on a specific person by repeating their name over and over, the way you might scroll through old messages today. The name disappears from circulation, and eventually so does the sharpest edge of the loss. Some anthropologists have argued this isn't superstition getting in the way of grief. It's a mechanism for managing grief, built directly into language itself. The anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, working with the Trobriand Islanders in the early 20th century, documented something related but slightly different. In Trobriand society, words themselves carried a kind of force. A name wasn't just a sound that pointed at a person. Speaking it could act almost like a spell, tied up with magic, reputation, and social power. Using someone's name carelessly wasn't a small thing. It was closer to handling a loaded object. So if names were risky or restricted, or replaced entirely by kinship terms, how did people avoid confusion? This is where it gets genuinely clever. Many cultures developed a system anthropologists call technonymy. Instead of naming a parent directly, you name them through their child. A mother isn't called by her own name. She's called Mother of Kale. A father becomes Father of Amara. The moment a couple has their first child, their old names can quietly disappear from daily use, replaced by this new relational identity built entirely around the next generation. Stop and sit with that for a second. In some of these societies, becoming a parent doesn't just change your role. It can functionally erase your old name from the mouths of everyone around you. Your entire identity gets folded into your child's existence. Now here's the twist that makes this whole picture even stranger. None of this means early humans didn't have identity. It means identity worked completely differently than it does for you. Your sense of self is built around a name that is uniquely yours, portable, and spoken constantly, even by strangers who will never meet you again. Early human identity was relational. It only existed inside a web of specific people who already knew you. Strip away that web, and in some sense, the you that existed inside it stopped making sense too. This is part of why so many indigenous naming systems avoid a single fixed name across an entire lifetime. Some cultures give a child one name in infancy, another after surviving a dangerous illness, another at the onset of adulthood, another after becoming a parent, another after a significant achievement or loss. Your name wasn't a label stapled to you at birth and carried unchanged to the grave. It was closer to a record of your life stage, updated as you moved through it. Compare that to how you exist today. Your name was likely chosen before you were even born, based on sound, family tradition, or trend. It goes on your birth certificate before you've done a single thing to earn it. It doesn't update when you change. It doesn't disappear when a relationship ends. It sits on your driver's license, your diploma, your gravestone, completely detached from the actual arc of your life. For nearly all of human history, that would have looked bizarre. A single unchanging word, spoken freely by anyone, tied to nothing you actually did. So why did fixed, freely spoken personal names eventually become the default? Scale is the simplest answer. As groups grew from dozens of people to villages, then towns, then cities, kinship terms stopped being enough. You can't call every stranger cousin. Trade, law, taxation, and record-keeping all needed something kinship terms couldn't provide. A stable, unique label that worked even for people who had never met you and never would. The personal name, in the form you use it today, is largely a byproduct of societies getting too big to run on relationships alone. Which means the thing you think of as deeply personal, your name, your identity, the word that feels most uniquely you, is actually one of the more recent adaptations in the human story. It's a bureaucratic solution wearing the costume of intimacy. And once names became fixed and freely spoken, something else quietly changed. Identity stopped being something a community assigned and updated over time, and started being something an individual carried alone, unchanged, into rooms full of strangers who had no web of relationship with you at all. That's a strange kind of freedom and a strange kind of isolation, folded into the same word. You can walk into any city on earth and hand someone your name, and they will have no idea who your mother is, what you owe them, or what stage of life you're supposed to be in. Your ancestors would have found that almost unthinkable. A name spoken by a total stranger, meaning nothing, tied to nothing. Modern life has pushed this even further than a crowded city ever could. Your name now exists on servers you'll never see, printed on forms you'll never read again, searchable by people who will never speak a single word to you. It has become the most public thing about you, even as your actual relationships, the thing names were originally built to encode, have become optional information you choose to share or withhold. The word got louder. The web behind it got thinner. And maybe that explains something you've probably felt but never quite put into words. Why does hearing someone say your name, really say it, with attention and warmth, feel different from being called sir, or buddy, or nothing at all? Why does a crowded room suddenly narrow when you overhear your own name spoken across it? Some researchers argue this reaction is wired in precisely because, for most of human history, being named by someone meant being known by someone. It meant you existed inside their web of relationships, not outside it as an anonymous stranger. Your brain still treats your name the way your ancestors treated belonging itself. So the next time someone says your name and it catches you off guard, that small jolt of attention isn't random. It's an old circuit firing, built long before names worked the way they do now, back when being named by someone wasn't a formality. It was proof that you mattered enough to be known. If you liked the video, please like, share, and comment.